Thank you so much. Good morning and a warm welcome to everybody joining us in person and online to the opening session of day 2 of the World Digital Economic and Technology Summit, organized by KSI, the Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific. As the MC kindly introduced me, I won't go into myself so much, but I'm delighted to be here and joining you virtually, albeit I would love to be there in person as well. Before I share a little bit about PBEC, I just want to acknowledge and thank Kamala, in particular at KSI, for all her hard work in bringing us all together. Great job indeed, and to the rest of the wonderful KSI team. So very quickly about the Pacific Basin Economic Council, who is a co-organizer of this year's event. We support KSI annually for some of their major events where we bring together business leaders, government agencies, NGOs, academics. So for the past 55 years, PBEC has served as a catalyst for meaningful dialogues like these. It's a platform for informative discussions and initiatives, and we look to promote the freedom of people, goods and services, and of course, digital trade across APAC. We leverage our historic links, expertise, and insights to construct regular updates for our community, sharing forthcoming policy announcements, opportunities for investors, and invitation-only events. So without further ado, I'd like to just talk briefly now about our session today. So we're going to be talking about the future of work in the digital economy, technology, education, talent, and training. So what are we seeing as the future of work as employees return back to the office in this post-pandemic period? So from a PBEC perspective, we're quite interested in 3 main themes that we're observing across Asia Pacific, and I'm hoping we'll touch on some of these today. So firstly, what would be the final share, if you like, of remote and hybrid work once things are now back to an accepted normalization period? It'll be really interesting to evaluate country by country in APEC to see what trends have occurred and what are actually going to here to stay type things. This will have a lot of meaningful effects in terms of policy making from an economic point of view, business, social, and societal impact. Secondly, a fundamental rethink we're observing is underway, looking at the key connections between education and work. What does it look like to create transitions from traditional education systems into good paying jobs? The future of work is in a lot of ways dependent on the future of education and how it adapts to changing worker preferences. Changing demographics and a growing share of adult learners are out there who have a lot of other things going on in their lives. So we are curious, are the education systems in Asia going to shift to adapt to catch up to these more mature students? In a lot of ways, manufacturing sector in Asia in particular has always had very robust structures, apprenticeships, training programs, etc., but not such a clear structure for other non-manufacturing sectors like health, for instance. And final sector that we're very interested in is obviously the whole adoption of technologies and how it's changing the types of jobs and roles that are in high demand. Huge challenge for countries like Malaysia and others for whether it's going to be able to create systems that allow people to change roles, sectors, and industry more easily and smoothly to grow with technology. More as an enabler rather than being left behind. So I look forward to my panelists today. So without further ado, I want to hand the floor now in a second to Dr. Sumitra, who's going to bring us through. I'm actually going to share quickly my screen just to show some of the digital stuff we're able to do here. If you can see my screen, let me know. And yes, we're going to take it through quickly, just some of the statistics. So if you're there, I would like to hand over the floor to Doctor. Please, would you like to explain some of your statistics that you did from the Q4 report?
Thank you, Michael. Very good morning to Michael and to my fellow panelists. Thank you to the organizers, KSI, for inviting me to share a little bit of perspective. I'm standing up so that I can see the screen a little bit better. This is something I just shared with Michael because we've been tracking the talent trends around digital talent trends for the last year or so. So what we've done is we've looked at more than 900 job roles that require some form of digital skills. Yeah, so either as a user, right? So right from the global business services type of roles, right up to programmers, UI, UX, digital marketers, so on and so forth, the entire range, data scientists and so on. And so we've actually found, this is research done on LinkedIn in Talent Insights, and we found that there are more than 260,000 digital talents who have profiles on LinkedIn. Now you'll see actually the demographics there. So demographics is, yes, there are more males, right? And I think the other thing that is interesting to point out is that it's not equally distributed across the country. So obviously you find that, and probably many of us already know this, but to set the context, talents are concentrated in the west coast of the peninsula, right? And the hiring demand also varies, right? So it's higher in the primary cities on the west coast of peninsula compared to other parts of the country. So these are things that I think we need to be aware about as policymakers and as companies. If you are looking at hiring talents, where are these talents? At the same time, what we've also found is that there's actually a surplus of talents in countries like, in states like Johor and Malacca. Right? So if you're looking at talent, career fairs and so on, these are probably where you want to have them. So that's one of the trends. Next, move up, please. So this is the other interesting thing, and I think we've seen with the pandemic this trend being accelerated, where talents, digital talents are being hired in sectors that are non-traditionally IT. Right? So of course, over the last few quarters, we saw the banking sector had a huge spike, but now we're starting to see other sectors that are also coming into the play. HR analytics, right, is a huge area. So staffing and recruiting, they're also looking for people who have data analytics, you know, and other digital skills. The other thing that was interesting is, if you look at the increase in trends of digital talents, it's come from, you know, such a wide range of sectors, right? Tobacco, renewables, environment, and biotech. And again, if you think about renewables and environment, because of the whole emphasis around ESG, that's probably also why we're starting to see a lot of digital talents going into that space, right? So if you think about how data can be a very primary part of managing your ESG impact, that kind of explains it. Next slide, please. Next, just move up. Okay, so these are some of the fastest growing sorry, can you go one up? Yeah. These are some of the fastest growing job titles, and so data science roles continues to be in high demand in Q4. Two fastest growing job titles in data science is still data engineers and data scientists. And we've looked at it not just in Malaysia, but kind of similar trends in Southeast Asia and Asia as well. Next one, move up please, Michael. Fastest growing skills, so no surprise, therefore then data analytics continues to lead. But I think the other thing to also be aware is of the trends in the region. Because what we've also found is some of the skills that were not top, like, you know, in the last quarter, they were top skills in the region, say in the middle of the year. For example, if you take React.js, which is a programming language, it was a top skill in the region 2 quarters before. But by the end of the quarter, it had become very high in demand in Malaysia. So something to be aware as we're looking at trends, not to be too fixated only to the talent trends we have now here in Malaysia, but also what's coming in. I think Anthony is going to be talking about that on the trends later. Move up, please. Is that my last one? Yeah, so this is, you know, what we've also spoken about, analytical skills being the most common skill that's required. I think it flows from the last one, as in the data analytics skills. Move up, please. Yeah, I think that's it. And the other interesting point that I wanted to highlight, which is probably further down the report, this report is available on our website, is that, you know, while we speak a lot about graduate unemployment, if you look at the employment trends, yes, it's rising for digital talents. The number of vacancies is growing quarter on quarter, but the requirement for fresh graduates, right, it's only 25%. So if you look at all the vacancies, only about 25% of vacancies out there are for fresh hires. So that's something to keep in mind. If we're policymakers, how do we ensure that our graduates are coming out on day one, already have experience that is almost like an entry-level talent, compared to a fresh talent from universities, because that's not what industry is looking for. They're looking for experienced talents. So that's all I have, Michael, on my end in terms of setting context. Shall I hand it back to you now, I guess?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stop sharing here for now and come back to the panel. Thank you so much. But Sumitra, before I let you go, I just wanted to, just out of interest, you mentioned very fondly that you've got 2 digital natives that you're looking after at home. Now that they're going back to school, what are some of the changes should be considered if you were advising, say, a government agency about the current educational system as we get back? Should it just go back to normal for school kids, or you feel there's going to be some differences to note?
Yeah. So, Michael, thanks for that. And I think these changes, while the pandemic has accelerated them, it has been in the making for some time now, right? If I observe, the natives in my home, the digital natives in my home, and also those that I've been privileged to engage with in my career in the digital education space over the last 5 to 7 years, what I've found is that the engagement is different. Their engagement styles and appetites are different. So this current generation are the current generation who consume content on demand. This current generation have side gigs. Many of them, teenagers, have side gigs. So they learn when they want to learn and what they want to learn. And the third thing is they have short attention spans for things that they're not interested in. If they're interested in it, they have long attention spans. So question therefore then as policymakers and even as parents is, how do we design content, and how do we deliver learning in a way that is engaging, especially because we have such diverse learning styles that we've seen emerge, especially during the pandemic. Not just diverse individually, but also demographically, urban, rural, M40, B40, that's one. The second, so engagement I think is really, really important to address. Whether we're keeping them at home or sending them to school, we need to think about that. The second one is in the area of relevance, right? And again, a lot has been said about graduate unemployment. And I think, if we look at the people in the room today and even ourselves here on the panel, when each of us sends our child to the university, the main thing we ask is, can they get a job? Financial security, right? That's the main question. Therefore, then, the most important outcome of any university education right now is employment. And who employs them? It's the employer. So the employer is the customer of every university. And therefore, we must create a conducive environment and policies and programs to enable and encourage and ensure that the employers have the most active participation throughout the tertiary education. As a parent, I would want that too, right? And if we cannot ensure that, then forever we're going to have this conundrum where the graduates that come out cannot meet the needs of our employers. So we really need a mindset change as a parent that employers are the consumers, the customers of products produced by universities. I think that's my take as a parent, Michael. Thanks.
That's great. And to be honest, that leads us straight into Mr. Anthony from Korn Ferry, because obviously where you sit, Anthony, you are in some ways the broker between the employee seeking employment and the employer seeking the employee. So, and matchmaking. So what are the trends, initiatives are you seeing when it comes to the market where we sit today? What are you talked just briefly offline before we came on stage that you have a report coming out. Would you like to share some more, please? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Michael, and good morning, everyone. And thank you, KSI, for inviting us for this session. I prefer a word called catalyst rather than a broker. So,
apologies, a broker.
No, not to worry, Michael. Thanks. So, to my fellow panelists as well, and good morning. So, yes, you're right. We are coming up something hot off the press, and since I have 7 minutes, I'll give 7 points of it. The rest of it, you'll have to download it from the actual report coming up. So, a context to this future of work today is after the 24 months, what Korn Ferry did was we looked at what's the actual scenario with employers, organizations, and job seekers or employees as well, right? So the power has shifted. from what it was pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. So from organization, it's moved to people, from profit to social or mutual prosperity, and from me to we. So our objective is to see how we can interconnect all of these, and actually, like what Dr. Sumitra said, actually making work for everyone, in an effective way. So quickly, let me just run through what are those 7 trends that we are seeing, right? So number 1 is reinvention. So redesign, or what we would normally say, innovation always follows disruption. So you would notice in the last 2 years, there's been more startups, more entrepreneurial initiatives, more new type of jobs, and of course, a whole shift of working from home, of how you say, or maybe the right way to say is work from anywhere right now as part of the trend, right? So that is one. The second one is in terms of scarcity. And why I say scarcity is because the 2-year period has left a mindset and a skill set change with people. They have retooled themselves. So if you were to ask about the big tsunami or the big quit everybody's talking about, it's actually happening. So some trends for you, just from a data point perspective, 50% of all the employees will need reskilling in the next 2 to 3 years. So I know Michael asked me to talk about upskilling and reskilling. It is becoming more evident. I will call it retooling yourself in terms of what areas you're looking for. So you're talking about half the working population. And you're talking about billions worldwide. In Malaysia, we would safely say about 13 million working population have to reskill themselves. Now, also to take note, about 3/4 of organizations are of strong belief that the turnover will increase from this year onwards. So be prepared for that shift, that employees will ask for things and or make a decision on their own to move forward. Number 3, I call it vitality. So you're talking about burnout. So pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, the burnout rate has increased tremendously. So you're talking about a significant increase of employees who feel that the pressure is on them. So as a result of the pressure, what kind of changes they are doing for their lifestyle and their work, and how are they managing that as well. So I would say the big top of the mind for organization is about well-being. Making sure your well-being is taken care as an employee, as an entrepreneur, and so on, right? But some data points to support why we need to do that. So the impact to organizations is about 10 to 15%, or the global economic output for unwell employees. Both, they're talking about mental well-being, resilience, and so on, right? And on the other hand, if you look at it, you're talking about highly engaged and productive employees can produce 50% better results, right? So in actual dollar terms, you're talking about every dollar spent on an employee for wellness delivers better 6 to 1 in terms of results. So the 4th topic, I think Michael brought it up, ESG. Sustainability in general, we talk ESG from the environment perspective, social perspective, governance perspective. So if you're talking about well-being of an individual, how about talking about the well-being of the place you live in, the society you live in, right? And I think it's important that as an organization, you have a policy, not just at the employee level. You start at the board level and then drive it down to the leadership level and through the organization. And that increases, one, a social responsibility result perspective, but also an employee return perspective as well. Because today, employee workforce are looking at what is the organization doing for me, for my family, and for my society, right? Moving on to number 5, this is for the first time, you're talking about individuality. So it's more personalized. Moving forward, there's no one size fits all. So if you are applying it to work, and I mean, whichever environment you are, you're talking about personalized assessment, personalized career development, personalized career progression. Rather than having one set, say, okay, it's 1 year, now we have to promote you. Instead of that, your conversations are going to be different. You're going to be talking to them and letting them know what is your interest. Would you like to go vertical, horizontal, whichever way you want, location and other ways of supporting, rather than saying this is the process, or it's already 1 year, we're going to promote you, or not, which, right? So the next is in terms of inclusivity. And in the interest of time, I'm going to just speed up a little bit. So you're talking about, instead of unleashing the individual power, there are, okay, let me put it this way. No more superheroes. Okay, you're going to have superhero teams, right? That's going to come in. Super teams. That's the new way. So no more individualized heroes. You're talking about super teams. And if you notice, even among the Marvel comics and others, you're seeing more of the teams coming in rather than just Superman, right? Right? So the trend is changing. Avengers, everybody's coming as a team, because that is also a reflection of how teams can deliver better results. Now, I'm sure you're looking for a data point on this. So you're talking about 76% are more likely to see ideas become actualized or even productized, right? And 70% are more likely to capture new markets. So you're not only developing new ideas, but you're also expanding your business, all right? And of course, 87% of the time, better decisions are made with teams, diverse teams. So increased diversity, inclusivity, you're guaranteed with better productivity, better economic growth and expansion, right? So last but not the least, I think I'm reaching my 7 minutes already. Michael is looking at me, is accountability. So accountability doesn't work who will do what by when anymore. So it's about ensuring that it works for everyone. So not only the initiator, the conductor, the maestro, the organization, the social impact, all of that put together, you're talking about something bigger, something more meaningful, something definitely building from you to your team, to your organization, to the society side as well. So I use the word agility. I think accountability is the new way of looking at agility. So with that, thanks, and back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, that was wonderful. Very concise and very precise. So moving on now very quickly to Digital Way Academy co-founder and director, Suhua. So Suhua, we're going to talk about has the pandemic and the recent downturn in the current state of the world economy changed your views on how to develop a future digitally ready workforce? Can you share some examples from your academy experience of, what are the educational solutions that you provide at DWA encompassing these goals? So the floor is yours.
Thank you for the question, Michael. And first off, I would just like to say that I've definitely really resonated with what has been shared before. And since, I think what has been shared so far has been more big picture. So from my background, I am as Michael has introduced, the co-founder and the managing director of an education social enterprise, which means that we are focusing on education and training of digital talents, right? So I think I'll be taking more from that perspective about education and effectiveness of education in training digital talents. Yeah, so first off, to address the first part of the question, which is about the changes from the pandemic and also the economic downturn. So I think I'll just highlight a couple of important observations of what has been happening. Right, the first one is definitely, of course, everybody in this room would already know, there has been an increasing adoption of digital technology in companies, right? And one of the common phenomenon during these economic downturns is that instead of hiring people, companies can actually turn to machines and other forms of digital solutions to get the job done, right? Especially for manual tasks or low-skill tasks as well, right? So this means that there is actually a rise in digital jobs, yet there is a huge shortage of digital talents, as already pointed out by Dr. Sumitra, right? So then what that results in is what we see as the high unemployment rate and a lot of people being underpaid as well, because their skill sets are not matched with what the industry is looking for, right? And many people actually fear that they would lose their jobs to machines, right? So for that part, I will also address it as well. And the third the third part is that people start to realize that, hey, you know what, I really need to upskill or reskill myself with digital. But yet some people are unsure, you know, how do they get started? And even when they have enrolled in certain of those digital courses, they may find that it's not exactly relevant to the industry or effective in helping them to master the skills and abilities, not just knowledge, skills and abilities that can make them to be immediately productive in that digital job role. And lastly, the last observation is actually the mental state, just as has been pointed out by Anthony as well, you know, the well-being part of it. I think with the recent news and, you know, bad news coming over and over again, right, with what has been happening around the world, I can definitely see that people have been feeling quite down, even some mental health issues as well, to an extent. So I think just drawing upon those observations, I'll just share a couple of thoughts on how that has shaped my views on what education can look like, right, for us to develop future-ready digital talents. So the first point is to emphasize that machines will never replace humans, right? But humans do need to reflect, right, and think of what are the strengths that we need to work on, and that what makes us human in the first place, right? What are the things that machines can't do, or it will take a very, very long time for machines to be able to do those things. So things like generating deep insights, you know, and innovating, and decision making, communication, relationship building. And often what we will find is not that a job is completely taken over by a machine, but we will have to work hand in hand with digital solutions in order to advance the way that we are working. So that's number one. And number two is about the industry relevance of the technical curriculum, industry relevance. I think just now Dr. Sumitra has touched on that as well, right? Talking about how education needs to be more integrated with industry, right? And employers, viewing employers as somewhat of the customer or end user. I think that's an interesting perspective, and I would like to build on that. Definitely, you know, for educators to work closely with the industry and the government so that education can better match the needs of the industry and government as well. And yeah, so, you know, what could that look like? It could be literally speaking to companies, literally speaking to industry experts and finding out what are the technical abilities that you need. What is it that would help a digital talent to excel in their job? And then actually incorporating that in the curriculum, in the education programs. I think that is a huge part that has been missing in the digital education of our country so far. And secondly is also to make sure that we cover the breadth and the depth of the digital knowledge and skills that is required. Because sometimes it is not that it is not relevant. Sometimes it is about it not covering enough for someone to be productive on the job as well. Okay, so moving on to the third one, which is effectiveness. So effectiveness of education and training. To be honest, I think this should be the key priority of educators, because the experts would have the knowledge of what the talents need to be equipped with in terms of knowledge and skills. But where educators come in and play a key role in education is making sure that it is actually effective. Right? I think that part, sometimes it's looked over. Perhaps the emphasis was too much on knowledge, but how about the learning journey, the learning experience, right? Supporting the learners in their progress towards mastery of those digital competencies. I think that is a very key part. And so my background is in neuroscience, so I'll talk a little bit about that, right? So how do we design the teaching and learning methods based on how the brain learns, so that we can optimize for that, right? Things like how do we capture attention and how do we guide the thinking process during the learning journey? How do we evoke curiosity, right? And make the learners an active agent of their own learning. I think that's very important. And also structuring in opportunities for learners to make mistakes, yes, make mistakes during the learning journey so that they know where are they at in terms of their knowledge and skills so that they can actually structure their own learning as well to move towards mastery. Yeah, and just a second point for this effectiveness of education or training, it would be to harness the power of digital for education. So I think it's very common that we hear people who go online classes that I hate online classes, I can't learn. But perhaps, maybe because online classes has been used as a substitution for physical class, that's why it's unenjoyable, right? Because of course, if it's the same experience, then physical class will be more stimulating. But in a virtual environment, I think there is so much more that we can do to use different learning tools that's virtual, right, and platforms to actually further engage the learners. So really using that to personalize the learning journey, I think is a very important part. How do we really harness the power of digital for education rather than just using it as a substitute for a physical classroom? And
okay, can I give you a warning?
Yeah, sure. So just the last one is personal development. Just last 30 seconds. It is about how do we tap into our resourceful state. Yeah, so I think this is the last one because it's easy for us to fall into a state of unhappiness or insecurity during a time like this. So education, how can we also support the learners to be in a more resourceful state where they feel calm, they feel secure, they feel joy in their learning process as well as amusement as well. Yeah, so I think that's the last point. There we go.
That's great. I mean, I have to say, so far, the panel is flowing very nicely because in some ways it's re-emphasizing the points of the first two speakers have made and resonates that these are reaffirming the trends that we're seeing. So with that, I want to pass now on to Mrs. Rita. Ms. Rita, we're going to, from Huawei, Malaysia, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'd like to then sort of move this on to back to, I guess, from the corporate point of view. We touched upon the importance now of ESG, but how do you advise your clients in this whole transition period that we're seeing? It's already happening for the last few years, but as people have said, COVID has accelerated that embracing of digital. But how do you avoid getting overly distracted? There's a lot of products to get your head around as a boss of a company. What do you recommend if you're talking to your clients?
Okay, hi. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, KSI, and Assalamualaikum. Good morning. Well, in embracing these digital platforms, I think what's the most evident is, I think, when during the pandemic, you can see organizations that, or economies that has adopted digital technology, they're pretty much cushioned in terms of the impact. They're very well in terms of even asking the team members to start working from home. They can still continue on. But for those who have not embraced fully, slowly but surely, I think they will do so. The only way right now is to go digital. It's quite difficult, I think, for us to even go back to where we were before. The only way certain is to move forward. But before we can talk to our customers, in fact, even countries who are interested in embracing digital platforms, digital technologies, I think the most important thing for us to really understand is it's doing things differently, changing the status quo, where you are brave enough to experiment with new things and at the end of the day, implementing it. The devil is always in the details of getting actioned, all the items actioned, yeah? And to do that, you would also need to understand what are the needs that you wish to address, what's the goal and that you wish to reach. And to do that as well, you need talents, yeah? Good talents, digital talents. I remember speaking once about this topic about talents. We've got many women or many young ladies who are taking up STEM courses in universities, but when we see them after graduation, where are they in the digital economy? There is a huge gap that's not being addressed at the moment. So perhaps one of the things that we should look at is the digital talents. We've heard about this from the previous speakers, but I think for us in Huawei, what we have done, especially when we advise organizations or countries, this is one of the things that please do not overlook. Some of the initiatives that we have done in pushing this agenda is, like for example, in Malaysia, we've worked together with universities, both private and public, in establishing ICT academies. Now, these ICT academies provide students with an alternative to kind of secure certifications, either in knowledge like 5G, cloud AI, and happy to say that we've got a total of about more than 30 institutions that have embarked on this. I have taken even just the intermediate level. It's really difficult. So you can imagine those who have taken the professional level and the expert level. Hats off to you guys who have done this. And there are organizations out there who really recognize this, and I think this answers the questions about making sure that graduates are actually work ready. So imagine those people who I think was identified just now, that the top skills, if you want to have more people in data science. If you've got, let's say, in one particular graduation batch, 2,000 of them in data science. So how do you differentiate the talents who you wish to bring into your organization? That differentiator could be that extra certifications, that extra initiatives you take to make yourself industry ready. So that individuality thing comes into play. And for Huawei, when we look at some of the suggestions of the solutions that we want to suggest to people, we pretty much look at 3 different areas. I think the first one is offering the best solutions. Best meaning that we also address customer needs, because one of our core values is customer centricity. We try to listen as much in terms of what's being said, what's not said, and what actually do you want to solve. Yeah, and we make sure that we respond as fast as possible that we can to that. And the services that we offer must or should be able to fit in terms of what are the requirements that you've got. And of course, the third is to build that robust digital platform for you. I mentioned earlier about the implementation, and in my previous role, transformation came in 8 steps. And the first one is to actually have a very strong willpower to move the whole organization or the country itself with one direction. And where is it that you want to go? That has to be set. And then comes the next steps in terms of what needs to be changed, who, where, when, how. And of course, at the end is the bling, how much. And the resource has got to come into play. And tracking this to make sure that the policies, the actions, the support, and more often than not, this particular word is kind of forgotten in a way, the ecosystem, the people who you have. Hence, the sustainability word will come in again. Because, like, for example, for Huawei, when we invest in a particular country, we also would like very much to grow the ecosystem, the support of the particular country itself. So we work very closely with associations, with our partners, and making sure that the adoption of digital platform will not actually become a barrier, but it's more an enabler for organizations. So another point that I would like to make when it comes to embracing digital platforms is that we need to understand that it is actually an integration of a new operating model and the approach. It has to come together. And at the end of the day, it's about producing higher revenues, managing your cost, and of course, providing better services, be it technology services or infrastructure services, agriculture services. And all of this is actually based on a very, very good foundation of stable connectivity and also support from organizations, the government, and also the ecosystem. So that would be one of the thoughts that I have in terms of how to support organizations and countries in embracing digital platforms.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was wonderfully put. And I think there's a lot to be said about the ecosystem that you talk about in order to get buy-in, if you like, to adopt some of these things. So I'd like to keep moving it along as a conscious of time. We'd now like to pass the floor to Madam Mahuran. So we're going to talk about, can you share through your own interactions with different agencies yourselves on the current state of affairs when it comes to supply and demand of labour? It's been touched upon a little bit by previous speakers, but what's the sort of situation in Malaysia as you see it, or even in the region? And what are the gaps you're observing which need urgently addressing? What are the nice, and perhaps maybe touch on what are the nice to haves? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, KSI, for inviting to this forum. Okay, when we talk about labour market, I want to refer to the government document that is 12 Malaysia Plan. You can see in that document, 12 Malaysia Plan focus on the realignment of the labour market, to sustain the growth and also to develop the talent that meets to the future needs. Okay, so when the policy maker wants to draft the labour market policy, of course, they consider a few things before they look into the labour market. The element that they look at is, of course, first is investment and the business that create the job for the talent. And of course, the government consumption and saving, the last one is also the private consumption. So you can see that all these elements affect the labour market, either it's directly or indirectly. So the main issue now is, why is the unemployment rate is high, and but at the same time, why the job vacancy is high? What happened? It doesn't link, right? So, and even industry, from the industry point of view, they always say that the supply sides did not produce the right talent that meets to the demand. So we need to address that issue. So in TalentCorp, we produce a report, we call it Critical Occupation List since 2015. The reason why we produce this report is actually to reduce the skill gap, to mismatch talent, to make sure that those who go for the studies in the private university or in the public and also private, they learn the occupation and also the skills needed by each occupation. So you can see that when we produce that we have already in 5 years, produced that. And I can see that the response from the private and also training providers are overwhelming, okay, and even they look forward to that report every year. Okay, why they do that? It's because they want to make sure those parents who send the children to go to the university, they get a job and they have the skill that the industry wants. Okay, and I have to say here, I would say that why not the public university? So is it a bureaucracy that we talk about? So you can see that we have been that report since 2015, and now it's 2022, and then only last year they applied it to the public university. So I'm here I want to highlight that should we look at the bureaucracy there that we need to address there? Okay, so. And when I just want to give example in the occupation that is created that related to the technology, there's a lot. It's a long list there. And even when we go on the skills there, there's also a technical skill needed, and there's also a soft skill needed. For example, like personal interpersonal skill, communication, creative thinking, problem solving. This is all important. Okay, that we need to guide the talent to be prepared when they go to work. Okay, so that is part of the skills gap. Now, I want to bring you to the statistics on the active labor force. So you can look at this moment, okay, the statistic that is produced, that is by DOSM, Department of Statistics, is there are about 15 million active labor force. Out of 15 million, there are about 9 to 10 million who are at the age from 24 to 39. So what does it show? So it shows they are in the group of Gen Z and also millennials. So we have to understand their values of this Gen Z and the value and millennials, and the industry have to go to map it, to match what are their values. Okay, based on our study, they have values in terms of transparency, they have values on the trust, they value and empowerment and accountability. Okay, I'm being surrounded by all young talent in the office, and even I'm being sandwiched by them. And when they look at our SOP, the standard of procedure, they say, man, why so difficult? I can make it better, I can make it short. So this is how they look at. So we need to look into that kind of system there. Huh? So talking about that, and the last thing about the value that they have is they value on work-life balance. Okay, so our panel mentioned about burnout just now, right? So they coming in and out from the company is normal for them. It's not about money. Of course, money is their hygiene. I can say that. Okay, they're starting family, they need money. Okay, but they also look at the values. So that is where, from the government, you can refer to the budget 2022. Okay, the government announced the incentive to the companies to implement the FWA, the flexi work arrangement, and also the hybrid workplace. Okay, and that because the agency implementation is us, the TalentCorp, and of course we reach out to all those companies who wants our help. Okay, how to implement the FWA implementation and how to do the FWA readiness assessment. Why we need that assessment? Because industry must know where are they, whether they are in zero knowledge on the FWA. And FWA. I'm referring to the MNC, JLC, and also SME. I believe MNC, they have no problem on all those. They have their guideline, their policies are very clear. What happened to the SMC? So we need to look at. So this is all the incentive of the government that we have, that we want to have to the industry and also the talent. So to know the details about the FWA and about the FWA tax incentive, you can go to our website www.talentcorp.com.my or www.flexiworklife.com.my. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Madam. So we're moving on now very quickly to Mr. Zul from Fortinet, who's a solution consultant and advisor. When we hear from the other panelists, I mean, obviously we don't have time to really sum it up too much, even though I have many questions perhaps. So it's time for another session after this. But I'd like to when I think of the sort of critical digital economic job needs, I think of the IT sector. And when we talk about that, we talk about IT engineers, code writers, cybersecurity experts. But are we pigeonholing the sector? I mean, I guess that's no longer valid, right? There's much more convergence happening within organizations. IT is very much across the board now. It's not just a nice to have and just about a database and security requirements or keeping your emails going. So can you share from your own perspective what you're seeing, what companies and clients are asking? Do IT themselves, personnel, require upskilling or retraining based on some of the new requirements? Over to you. The floor is yours, Mr. Zul.
All right. Thank you, Michael. It's a good question and a great question, an interesting question, actually, and very, very much relevant to many IT organizations in any size of enterprise. Okay, first look at the role of IT, right? If you notice, basically, from the panel's speaker, we're talking about the skill set. So what I'm going to discuss here is, from technical perspective, IT is a one engineering discipline that well trained from that aspect, from technical aspect of it. So that's great. But in reality, basically, when they want to go into the market, what is important, basically, is the soft skill. This is where that Madam Hajah Mahuran is talking about the critical thinking, about the business acumen, and talking about communications, and it's about getting the business nuances and a language to be part of IT. So this is another one area that I think the IT need to upskill themselves, because they are not robotic. Okay, organization is not run in a very silos manner. We need to cooperate. And then even at a Fortinet in a company, we are talking about basically integrations a lot. And most importantly is that for IT to relevant, any IT organization, regardless whatever your discipline, they need to be friendly to their business, because their business, internal business unit, basically their internal customers. And it, as like us, the customer pay our salary. So we need to satisfy our business needs. And we need to understand basically what the business wants out of IT. So those are the missing skill, I think, that very dominant that we need to address. The technical part aspect of it, I think the IT is set to go. So there's not much basically improvement there other than to keep up the technology. Because in IT world, I would say that average every 6 months, there's always new things you need to keep it up. This is also another challenge that a lot of the organization, they cannot keep up with the level of training. So the question is that who going to train who? Does the organization need to train the IT personnel? Or IT personnel basically is should train themselves and asking basically assistance and funding from the company they're working. So for a company basically to look into IT training itself, it's not gonna work very well because that's not the expertise. So the individual IT personnel, basically, they should look what they want to do, whatever they want to go, basically going to help the organization, and then pursue that training. And most importantly is that deliver the value that they promise to the company they're working for. So that is where that I see that how that the IT can effectively retrain themselves, upskill themselves. So it's not only focusing on the technical aspect of it, but also look from the communication, look from the, I would say, the relevancy of their presence in the organizations to become a more effective individual or effective teams. So that will be my point of view, and even from Fortinet, we believe in in that ideology. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I mean, just before I let you go, just to come back with, again, from Fortinet's position, how are you going out to the market and able to attract talent in this current, I guess, highly competitive environment for skills? So, Mr. Zul, do you want to quickly just come back with that comment? How are you attracting talent in this current market, which is proving quite challenging? I mean, the vacancies are there that we've talked about, but the talent is not, per se.
Okay. In the security industry, we have one big challenge, basically. We don't have enough manpower. Across the board and all over the world, if you look asking for security personnel or professional, there isn't enough. So this is one fact that that globally the industry has acknowledged. So to attract the talent, of course, that when you have only so much small pool and then being compete by all other company, the hiring factor is one thing, but I think the culture, the accountability, something that being mentioned by the panelists is one great idea is that we encourage, because they have to, we want them to be part of the contributor. So in Fortinet, basically that we encourage all our personnel to become the innovator, to become the intellectual property owner of the, to contribute to the company. So as much as patent, we really encourage a lot of research, R&D, and that's become our pillar in Fortinet, actually. So from that angle, we can retain and we can attract a lot of the talents, which is very meager right now. So industry itself now is facing you know, the lack of talents in security world.
Okay, thank you. So last but not least, I want to move quickly on to Mr. Hazmin, Director of Industry Business Architect, Public Sector at SAP Malaysia. Welcome, Mr. Hazmin, to the panel today. And I just thought, given all that's been said before us, I just wanted to bring it back to the three areas that I kind of mentioned at the beginning, which is about the remote and hybrid work market share post-COVID. Where does SAP see that from where they sit? The fundamental connection between education and work, which has been highlighted, as well as this continuous adoption of technology, given a very tight labour market. So can you share some of your examples from first-hand experience with your interactions with some of your clients, but also internally, how to address these gaps? You know, how can you speed up, if you like, the upskilling? Is there an ability to shorten training periods to get those essential skills to address this this crunch? And is the government in Malaysia, you know, through its My Digital initiative, doing sufficiently enough for you where you sit? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you, KSI, for inviting. So again, if we look at the SAP as the technology provider, I think we've been, in my past experience and current engagement with the Malaysian government itself and other organizations, we help a lot organization, enterprises in their digital transformation journey. And that includes government around the world and also the Malaysian government. So if we go back to your three main trends, right, working hybrid, I think that's practically the way moving forward. Even I think now the main topic in the town is talking about flexibility. Are we open for flexibility? Or are we going to work 4 days in a week? But I think in the recent research done by SAP through our sentiment analysis platform, what we call as Qualtrics, we had about more than 65% respondent in Malaysia that's looking to flexibility rather than 4 days working in a week. That shows there's a lot of values that they need. It's not the shorter time of the week that they need, but the flexibility. I think Madam Mahuran mentioned about the values that we put into the organization. Hence, that really relate to the hybrid working environment. Of course, that is the overarching objective that we are trying to achieve. How do we support that, right? Of course, technology plays an important role. SAP has a lot of platform and technology to assist the businesses, to assist the government, to be able to work flexible and in hybrid mode. However, I think the panelists also discussed a few points. Underlying to support all these fundamentals, it is very important that we put the policy in place, right? I've gone through a few discussions when we want to simplify things, when we want to reduce certain processes, but at the same time, we gain the same outcome. But are we ready to change some of these processes, right? I think that's the fundamentals that we need to address. Not just technology, but the policy behind it. And talking about upskilling, reskilling, it's actually part of DNA within SAP. I'm not sure that Sumitra back then in 2013, SAP we did a bit of collaboration between SAP and MDEC, where we work into a program where we address a bit on graduate employability, right, at that point of time. And we are working closely with some of the local universities and private universities here in Malaysia. And at that point of time, is to look into just graduate employability. But I think in the current world right now, we are not just talking about having jobs. We are talking about, I think, Michael, you mentioned also, is about getting a great payouts, right? What are the salary range that we are talking about? I think that's key that we want to bring into the discussion. And SAP did listen to that, and we addressed that. In the recent Penjana program, I think it's also a collaboration that we did together with Yayasan Peneraju and TalentCorp, where we work with some local universities, is to embed some of the industry specific into the university syllabus. And this is to address the demand. Because as again, we are helping a lot of organizations out there in various industries, oil and gas, telecommunication, utilities, you name it. There is a huge demand that we see. And we see there's a potential capability within our graduates that need to be injected with some industry-specific skill sets. And that's where we as an organization that provide technology to all these organizations, be able to inject those technical capabilities, technical syllabus into that, and allow them to get better jobs, better salary in the market. So that is going on, but moving forward, I would love to see this as a bigger scale, together a collaboration, not just, from the government side, together with us as a technology provider and my other colleague. And of course, I think we need to also look into the whole ecosystem. I think Rita mentioned about the whole ecosystem. Where do we want to place them, right? The customers, the partners. So it's a collaboration. All three main parties need to work together in order for us to be able to address the future workforce, the upskilling, reskilling. And I think the last point, Mike, I just want to share this. And SAP, we don't have that chance yet with the Malaysian government, but we would love to do that. We have done this with other government in the region where we also address the working adults, civil servant, for example, right? When we talk about digital transformation, the first that came out in their mind is about, is my job going to be replaced by robotics, right? So it's not about that, right? It's about repurposing, upskilling, reskilling, and where is the focus is. So when we deliver a technology, there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of simplification, and that's the threat of these people think. But in other regions in the world, in our neighbors' government, we have embarked in upskilling and reskilling where we help the civil servant, the working adults, to go into focusing a lot in their core business, right? And leveraging technology to do their jobs better. I think that's the fundamental of moving forward. And I guess I would love to work closely with any of the government agencies and probably not take it copy and paste, but how do we localize it to the Malaysian context? I think that's very important, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great points. Okay, we've got about just over 10 minutes left. So instead of me going straight into the summary side, I'd like to just go back to the panelists, and I'll probably kick it off on this one is, what are we not talking about? What haven't we mentioned today so far? And it can be a little bit off topic, if you like, that we need to be talking about. And put this in relation to having a government agency audience. So I liked the fact that Hazmin mentioned there the civil service, a huge audience, if you like, in multiple countries around ASEAN. And the civil servants at the end of the day are here to, improve public service deliverable targets and productivity. And productivity is the word I want to talk about for a second, because the panelists have all shared, in some respects, employees' expectations, the workforce expectations of the future. But I want to talk about a CEO's perspective or a chairman's perspective, where they're still looking at the P&L, it has to make money. And all of these things sound great, but I feel productivity is going to go down. How can I be reassured, and how do we train the CEO and chairman's mindsets to embrace this whole movement? Because I feel there's pushback, just like there is in geopolitics, this nationalism sentiment coming through. I think there'll be pushback on some of these, what could be regarded as soft approaches to the workforce, which could be deemed an old school mentality. So we still have to address that sort of ageism perspectives that still exist in the globe. So that's my first perspective. Maybe something that we're not necessarily talking about is mindsets of the owners, the CEOs, chairmen. You've seen comments from like Elon Musk on Twitter, which are counter to some of this flexibility that we've talked about. So perhaps we go back to Dr. Sumitra.
Thanks, Michael. So I think one of the areas that I'd like to highlight is talent mobility, right? We live in a world today where talents are mobile. As we said, we can work anywhere. And I think we need to think about talent mobility from two perspectives. we all know the threat. And the threat is that the ability to retain talents is going to be increasingly challenging, right? How do we retain good talents? Especially local talents who may be moving away. And I think today a lot of our policies are tailored around how do we retain talent. But I think we need to maybe flip it and think about the opportunity. You know, with talent mobility, what this means is we now can attract the best talents from anywhere in the world to Malaysia. And so then maybe we need to flip the way we think about this and say, rather than how do we retain talents in Malaysia, because talents globally are mobile, how do we create a conducive environment that's going to attract the best talents in Malaysia, regardless of their nationality? If we do that, my personal view is that we will retain the best Malaysian talents here. So I think we need to think about it another way. That's it from me. Thanks, Michael.
Wonderful, yeah. Anthony, over to you, and 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. So I might be a bit controversial here. So I'm looking at a big area that we are missing here. Elephant in the room is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are many areas of this that we need to keep in mind with a highly diverse country. Malaysia can take full advantage of this. Number one, I will definitely start with women in tech. Women in technology, right? And if you look at, I mean, this is thanks to KSI, this is the first panel I'm seeing more women on this. A round of applause for the KSI team. And the reason why I'm saying is there's so much of potential that can be harnessed with that diversity that we have. But we also need to create awareness, policy level, policy makers. Number one, organization, board leaders must take this as a mandate to ensure that they're driving, not for the quota. That's why I said I'm going to be controversial. Look at the merit and then give the diversity a visible action and a timeline, not just lip service. The second part of it, in the line with diversity, is about aging workforce. I think we are nearing that. We are almost there. Malaysia is almost there. I think we need to look at kind of a perspective and a strategy to apply to aging talent and see how that can be reintegrated into the workforce, right? And of course, this is going to grow. Worldwide, it is a problem. And I think this is an angle for work creation and as well as inclusivity that we need to keep in mind. The third one, I think, with that I will end, is about the specially abled. A group, of course, has been seen as socially, from a social or a CSR perspective, must now come into the mainstream, must be kept in mind as part of inclusivity as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Wonderful. Suha.
All right, so I think...
1 minute.
Yes, for me, I think it would be about resourcefulness and also about value creation. So just now we have briefly touched on resourcefulness already. So the state of calm and security and stimulation and growth and things like that. And also, how do leaders actually create that state of resourcefulness within the company? And also as a company, how can they act in a resourceful way so that they can be more connected with other companies, with the industry, with the nation, with the government as well, rather than the unresourceful state. I think I won't delve into that. And I think the bottom line is really using that resourceful state to create greater value for everyone around. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Rita, what would you like to say? 1 minute.
Okay, so I think the points that I wanted to make has already been captured. So the women part, I think we spoke about that before we started the panel session. I was asking Anthony, do we have a women in tech session in WCIT? So I did mention that, and the value creation is definitely one of it. But I would just like to share a little bit. This is taking a step back. So you were talking about how CEOs can and stuff like that, but then how do we shape this upcoming CEOs? So I just want to bring that to the women topic a little bit. So we work together with Women Leadership Foundation in providing this platform for future women leaders, whether it's entrepreneuring or whether it's in company, but providing you with the right skills, knowledge, and experience in this new tech world that is borderless, and it can be a bit intimidating because you don't know what's coming up. So just want to give you the right information, the right tools. So one of the things we've also produced in Huawei is a report that's called Intelligent World 2030. It's available in public domain. It's being researched by 1,000 all these cerdik pandai scholars. It's being syndicated over 2,000 workshops globally, and it can actually tell you what's coming up in the future. So upcoming CEOs should be able to be exposed to this knowledge, so they know exactly what kind of decisions they need to make. Well, not other than just the P&L, but how to actually make it sustainable and continue on with this topic. So that 30% thing in terms of women in boards, I did mention as well in the previous speaking session that I had, it should not just be a seat that's just filled because, okay, I'm going to appoint you just to check the box. It should also be because of the merit and because we can actually contribute. So actually, why not just make it 50%? Why 30%? Push it a bit more lah. And you can see, I think we dominate the stage. Yeah, come on, women. So this is a topic which I feel very strongly about, and I'm actually representing one of the women leaders in Huawei, one of the only Melayu as well, yeah, and to also check the box. So yeah.
Fantastic. Moving on to Madame Mahuran.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, my point actually has been taken by Dr. Sumitra, talking about talent mobility and also diversity by Mr. Anthony. Okay, when I look at the news today, you can see that Singapore is taking Malaysia top talent. You see, so it's what it shows is a talent mobility. So we have a program in TalentCorp, they call it Returning Expert Program. So, and those Malaysians who wants to come back. So we enhance that program. So meaning that those Malaysian diaspora who are working outside Malaysia, they still contribute to the country by how? Okay, so how? There's a few programs that we do, and engage with us. So we will link you to those programs that require their expertise and contribute to our country, Malaysia, negara cintaku. Yeah? Okay, talking about diversity and inclusion, I agree also with Mr. Anthony. We must have diverse in skill, diverse in talent, diverse in everything. Okay, and even one of our initiative also, we will develop a national skill registry where we know that the skill is actually cross-cutting to occupations. So we want to make sure that those talent can refer to a document when they want to do upskilling or reskilling. Okay, and in terms of aging populations, I agree with you, Mr. Anthony, and we are also in working with policy MOCHA, developing the framework of senior hires for Malaysia. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Mr. Zul, very quickly, 30 seconds, I'm afraid.
All right, Michael, quick one.
Yeah,
okay, what I like to see basically happening in Malaysia and the IT industry is, especially in Malaysia, is a close collaboration between local universities with technology player like Fortinet, and we have SAP here, so that we can produce available, I would say that players once they graduate. So right now that at Fortinet we are embarking, and we are actively basically try to engage as many as learning institutions all over the world, including in Malaysia. We already signed up a few universities that we help them to build the syllabus and to train their students to become potentially great contributors to the nations and also to the industry.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Hazmin, I think in some ways you've kind of mentioned quite a bit about wanting to work with governments, but anything else you'd like to add?
Sure, Mike. I think, again, going back to my 2 points, right? I mean, quickly, we've done a lot of collaboration within the government agency and university. I would love to see this at a larger scale, right? Where we include the right ecosystem, partners, customers into this engagement. then we'll get more collaboration. That's one. But I think I would like to re-emphasize, or probably also a gap that I potentially see, is also to help the government to provide better service delivered to the businesses, to the citizens. And again, if we talk about the word around the town, it's also talking about sustainable, right? So we want to be able to provide sustainable government, at the same time, a sustainable resources, talent that we want to put in place. Hence, I guess the most important is also to relook into the civil servant. And we want to work closely with the government, especially because we have done it with other government around the region, on how we want to reskill, upskill them. And I guess in my digital blueprint, it has specifically outlined, even one of the big KPIs is about transforming some of the government workloads, 80%, into cloud, for example. That's a huge move. And it's really a great plan by the Malaysian government. But again, I think the most important, are we having the right skill sets to support this, right? And hence, I guess, we would love to see a lot of collaboration, and we want to work closely where we can help the government to look into putting the right talent, the right skill sets into the civil servant, so that the objective of my digital blueprint will be achieved, and ultimately the 12 Malaysian plan at the end of the day. Yeah.
Thank you, Hazmin, and thank you to all of my distinguished panelists for a wonderful dialogue session. I've been taking pages of notes. I don't have time to sum it all up. I will share my thoughts with the organisers, and we'll have that uploaded to the website in a post-event summary. But I guess one thing I would say, if the government is watching in Malaysia, you've just seen a perfect example of inclusion and diversity to implement your My Digital Plan and execute it 100% success by 2025 for Malaysia to become a high-income country, attracting multiple talent from all over the world to come and work in Malaysia. So with that, I hand back to our organisers, and could I ask for a round of applause for our panellists today?